Let's kick off with our first presentation after lunch, and this is going to be good. Mr. Lee Watanabe Crockett is going to talk about future-focused learning, solving problems that matter. Lee's an author, he's a speaker, he's a designer, inspirational thinker, and the creative force behind some of the most exciting transformations in education happening worldwide today. He is a co-author of several best-selling books and continues to work with educators and corporations in several countries. Please make him very welcome.
Are you excited? Yes. Ooh, I'll have to be good then. So I'll put my contact points up here in case you have anything you'd like to say to me. It's amazing how free people feel on Twitter to criticize a presentation. I always enjoy that, so thank you for that. Watanabe, where does that come from? It's my wife's last name, actually. My wife is from Japan, and it's a very common practice for a man marrying into a family of girls to change his name to take the wife's last name. It's as common either way in Japan. And Japan is, to me, is home. It's a place that affects my thinking greatly. It affects my work immensely, and it challenges me personally in many, many ways. It's a beautiful place, and it's a place that causes me to slow down and to think a little bit about what it is that we're doing, and why is it that we're doing it, and what is the meaning behind what we're doing with STEM and with school, and what are we trying to accomplish. You know, recently I was at my uncle's farm, and he grows kaki, which are persimmons, and they have real significance in Japan, especially at New Year's time. It's a very, very, very important fruit. And when I went to his farm, I noticed that a lot of his crop hadn't been picked yet. And so I asked him, Oji-san, nane yatte no? Do you want a young guy to get up on the ladder and get those for you? And he looked at me very, very seriously, and he said, oh, no, we don't pick those. And I said, why? It's 20% of your crop. He said, what would the birds eat during the winter? And he said, and then the fruit falls to the ground and rots and fertilizes the trees so that we have a crop next year. He said, you ask me, why do I leave? I leave it for the future. Why do you take everything and leave nothing for tomorrow? It really made me think. Also reminded me what a jerk I am. So the question is, what are we leaving for the future? What are we creating? What is it that we want to accomplish? What does future-focused learning look like? And we're busy, right? Like everybody, we're busy. Even the calendar has given up. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's done kind of by Tuesday. While all this is going on, the thing is that the digital disruption has occurred. And this is not news to us, but the world's largest software vendors, they don't write the applications. The biggest media provider doesn't even create the content. The phone companies don't own the infrastructure. The biggest movie house, biggest cinema doesn't own any movie houses. Biggest accommodations provider doesn't own any real estate. The biggest taxi company in the world doesn't even own a cab. And with all of this, the United States is still using floppy disks to run its nuclear program, I kid you not, which is disturbing. And we're busy. We have so many devices and so many things to do with them, right? We all get annoyed. Have you seen, when somebody's texting in the car beside you? Doesn't that aggravate you when somebody's on their phone while they're driving? Do you get upset about it? You ever been in a cab in Hong Kong? Because you get into a taxi in Hong Kong, that's a different experience, let me tell you. They even have texting while walking lanes now in Asia. That's great fun. Yeah. I don't know how many times somebody's walked into me in an airport, and that's no joke. You walk into me, you're going to know you walked into me, and I'm not going to get the worst end of it. Goodness, we're so busy, right? I had a real one of these as a kid. You remember I had a real one? And it seems we don't have time for the simplest tasks, We all chuckle, but I know you've had your phone or your tablet in the toilet with you, and if you deny it, I'm going to just check with your spouses. What's the end game? Where are we going with this? What are we trying to accomplish? Where's it going? iPhone 8 is going to be out next month. Oh, that's exciting, right? I remember when the iPhone 7 was released, they said it wasn't going to sell because there was going to be an iPhone 8 a year later. It's crazy, right? We all have to have the latest and greatest of everything. But in our rush to do so, in our mindless rush to do so, do we really understand the picture that exists behind our actions? Because what we send to China is electronic garbage. And there are cities in China, cities the size of Perth, that are nothing but electronic waste, and families move into them and live there and make their living from burning the little bits of insulation off the wires. We do this, you and I. Our world, we created this. You know, it's a problem. There's a lot of problems. A lot of problems that we distract ourselves with. We don't even want to think about. We're too busy. And how would we solve them? You know, this is a problem. You know, we think about plastic. Think about the bottles. It's amazing. You know, I'll give you some facts that maybe you don't know. We only recover 5% of the plastics that we produce. Did you know that? And it uses 8% of the world's oil supply to create all that plastic. It breaks down to the ocean to fragments so small that a single bottle, a fragment of it could be found on every kilometer in the world. Every piece of plastic pretty much that was ever made still exists, and it takes 3 liters of water to make a liter of bottled water. Recently, the 2 largest bottled water suppliers in the world finally admitted it's just tap water. Just tap water. It's just tap water at 2,000 times the price of tap water. What are we doing? What's this all about? You know? Now, it's very cute, but in our desire to have 37 pairs of jeans for $3 and to wrap our child in the latest baby whatever, the child will outgrow it by the time we finish moving on from this slide. But we do this, right? What we don't see is, there's a school I work with in Bangladesh, and the view from the school is quite stunning because this is the river of toxic waste created by the fast fashion industry. See, clothing is a problem. Clothing is a huge problem. It's a problem that matters. The second largest polluter in the world next to the oil industry is fashion. And I don't know if you've noticed, there's no global shortage of clothing. No one is running around saying, could you please give me some clothes, please? And so when we donate our clothes and we think we're doing the right thing, they don't need it. And where does that stuff go? It gets shipped. When a disaster like Haiti happens, they drop it off by the boatload. They just drop off tons of clothing that no one needs. It's a problem. And the half-life of clothing is pretty substantial. Just how long does it take your kitchen dish rag to disintegrate, right? It's a problem. What happened in Fukushima is a problem. I live 60 kilometers from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor. And people think that this is over. No, there's bags and bags of nuclear contaminated soil just sitting there in the middle of fields, piled up inside of an elementary school, piled up in a tunnel in the mountains that used to be a roadway, because no one wants it. Who's going to take it? Will you take a bag? No one will take it. It's a problem. Now, I'm not trying to depress you after lunch or cause you some indigestion, but there's a shift that happens when we're looking at disruptive change. If we are unaware, unwilling, or unable to respond to change, then we'll be undone by it. And you're now aware. And that feeling that you have inside, there's a very specific word for this in Buddhism. It's called sesshin. And sesshin is the little tingling that happens at the bottom of your heart when you become aware of the suffering of another human being. Isn't that awesome that there's a word for that in Japanese? And it is a gateway to relevance to the learner. When we can create that emotional connection, the self disappears and we become aware of something bigger, some other possibility. It's a way to create relevance and context. So I ask students on a regular basis. I work with schools all over the world, and I work with a lot of schools in Australia. And one of my schools in Canberra, we started a process a year ago called the Solution Fluency Challenge, where we put students together and we asked them, year 4 and 5 kids, what is the biggest problem in the world that you think that needs solving? And it was fantastic. 4 primary schools all working together using Solution Fluency, mentored by a high school student to try to identify a problem that matters to them and then to come up with a solution for it. Now, when I walked around facilitating during this day, I expected to see problems like my mom doesn't let me play Pokemon Go, or my sister's mean to me. Like, it's year 4, right? How bad could it be? Well, let me show you some of the things that are on the minds of year 4 and 5 kids. This one group has 27 things that are a concern to them, including abduction, abuse, murder, crime, and poverty, homelessness. This group can't even spell it all, but they're concerned about it, animal extinction. And then you see the transition from child to adult. Space junk, space exploration, aliens, right? Crime, drugs, murder, homosexuality, diseases, junk food, terrorism, obesity, rape. It's year 4. And as I watched them map out the things that were on their minds, it really made me realize that we don't give our learners enough credit. I just want to point out that sharks are a problem in Canberra. Potentially with global warming one day, maybe. So this is year 4 or 5 kids in Australia, right? So what's on the mind of our kids? This is what's on the mind of your learners. And you're worried about NAPLAN. Wow. Now, I believe in a bright future, and I work to create a bright future for all beings. That's my raison d'être, is what brings me here. So I see possibilities in this. I don't see doom and gloom. I just see that's awesome. Because we can take the conflict that these learners are feeling and we can help them to turn it into what they really, really have, which is a desire to create a bright future and to do good for others. Every kid, every child wants to do this. No child is born a racist. No child is born to hate. We all want to do the right thing. So how can we help them to do this, My personal study lately, the thing that I do for my own pleasure and my own drive, is to study the shakuhachi, which is a Japanese bamboo flute. And it's really simple. It's the root end of the bamboo. You can see it's been pulled out of the ground and cut off and has 4 holes. And it should be really simple. It's got 4 holes. How tough could it be, right? Yeah, it's the most difficult. I play about 20 instruments. It's the most difficult instrument that I've ever studied. Infuriatingly so. So when you look at Western music, it looks like this. This is a nice early piece of music that maybe you would have played. So here's a beginning piece of shakuhachi music. And it's read from top to bottom and right to left. So there's no time signature. There's no key signature. There's no tempo. There's no fortissimo here. There's nothing except some ideas. When you take all that stuff away, when you take all that structure away, all that's left is sound. And my sensei, my shakuhachi sensei, he's brutal. The first time I sat down with him, he's an amazing, amazing man. He's recorded 47 albums. Yeah, I was so lucky that he took me as a student. And the first time I sat with him, he said, "Can I play your shakuhachi? I'd like to see you. You're curious if it's a good one." I said, "Yes, absolutely." And it's like having Yo-Yo Ma play your cello and sit across from him. It was like that kind of an experience. It was amazing. He played for a few minutes, and he handed it back to me, and he goes, "Well, I'm clear about one thing." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's not the flute." So, what? He said, "It's not the flute." So I want you to understand that shakuhachi is never going to sound right. Every day it's different. And you're going to want to blame the humidity, and you're going to want to blame the flute, and you're going to want to do this or polish that or adjust this. And you're always going to have a reason. He said, anytime that you're feeling that, you need to go stand in front of the mirror and look at the reason. Because there's something going on inside of you that's making it not sound right. Damn, my first 2 minutes, right? And it's never got any easier studying it. Everything I study in Japan is exactly the same way. It's just brutal. So what did I learn? I learned the solution, and the solution for our kids is exactly the same. The problem is me. And the question is, what can I do? You see, I can very simply carry this with me everywhere I go. And I can fill it up in the morning, and I can say no thank you anytime I'm offered a plastic water bottle. Oh, thank you. I'm good. And it's not about judging others. It's not about even telling. You would never have known that I do this. This is what can I do. That's the point. Do you understand? What can I do without judging, blaming, or affecting the behavior of another person? That's 100% of my capacity to solve the problem. And then from there, the question is, how can I influence my family? How can my family then influence my community? And then how can my community influence my country? And from there, we can change the world. So when we look at a problem like plastics and we think, well, I can't solve that. I can. I've solved it. I have solved the problem. 100% of my capacity to solve the problem. Do you understand? And we empower children with this, and we ask them to do the same thing. So when those students in Canberra are working together, they're looking at what can I do personally, what can I do worldwide, what can I do in my community? And they're tackling big problems, problems that matter, and working out ideas. And it was really quite amazing. This one group, they look at the letters, solution in great big letters, for war. Now, who sits down in the afternoon and said, you know what, I'm going to solve war, that's what I'm going to do. These kids do. And look at what they've come up with. Be kind, be fair, divide land equally, Ruby should be queen. Goes without saying. But then they came up with this idea of a new worldwide currency, evenly distributed. And these kids decided if there was one currency that the whole world shared that was spread equally, that there wouldn't be any need for conflict. Now, whether or not that's a viable idea, do they understand war on a very, very deep level? They understand conflict around the world in many, many places, on many, many levels. They sure do. Without us telling them, without us talking. These kids have solved the problem of homelessness. And what they do is they make sleeping mats for homeless people. This is for a very thin homeless person. No, I'm kidding. It's 1/4 of the mat, actually. What they do is they go to the dump and they find single-use plastic bags that have been discarded and thrown into the dump, and they collect them. And they wash them and they cut them into like a circle about 2 centimeters wide, if you understand. It's like cut layers. Wrap one inside of the other, make a knot from it, and they create plarn, plastic yarn. And then these rough and tumble boys sit down for a couple of hours after school and they crochet. It takes 100 hours to make a single mat, and they've saved 5,000 bags from the landfill. Now, have they solved the problem of homelessness? Be very careful before you say no. Because I would challenge you if you would be willing to go and tell these boys that they haven't solved the problem. They, with no money, with no income, with no means, what have they done? What have you done? I'd say they've done 100% of what they can do to solve the problem. And when we empower learners this way, it's amazing. It would be the same as saying that your vote doesn't count. You in your corner of the world and me in mine work together, and we can solve all of these problems. These students at one of my schools in Melbourne solved the problem of unethically sourced palm oil. They banned every product in their school, Subway, Lindor, Kit Kat, anything that was unethically sourced palm oil they got rid of in their school. It's very, very interesting how they went about the process. And these students now have been working with Fluency for 3 years, and I went and saw them the other day, and they asked if we could take a picture together. So we took a picture here. They're now in year 5 now, this same group of wingnuts, and it's amazing. These kids are formidable. There's nothing they believe that they can't do. It's quite incredible. Another group in that same school solved the problem of pollution in the Jawbone Marine Sanctuary. Went out down and actually picked up what was in the Jawbone, picked up what was at their school, cataloged, charted it, and graphed it. There's so many things that they did. There's so much I could tell you if we had more than 45 minutes. But the point is that students can do anything. The most underutilized resource in the classroom is the learner. The most underestimated person in the classroom is the learner. They continually shock me with what they're capable of doing. And so solution fluency, one of the essential fluencies that I wrote about in Mindful Assessment, is the process that we use with this. And the reason that we do this is because outside of the world of school, nobody cares about what you know, but they care a great deal about what you can do with what you know. This is the essential and important part of it. So what I like to do when I think of future-focused teaching, there's 3 things that I want us to do in the process. The first is to give students problems that matter, and here's the big part. They have to matter to them. It doesn't matter if it matters to us. It has to matter to them. The second thing is to give them access to the tools, and when I say the tools, I don't mean this stuff. Although technology is certainly part of the process, what I'm talking about is this stuff, the essential fluencies, the skills. These are, in fact, the general capabilities. It's the headware, not the hardware, that matters. The tool's going to change. How we communicate, what product we use will change, but the process of developing communication stays the same. And the third, and this is the tough one for you, is to find the courage to stand aside. We say we want to build resilience in our learners, but we never let them fail. We do everything for them but write the final exam, and we even show them how to do that. We never let them fail. We have to move the responsibility of learning from the teacher where it has been to the student where it should be. And if you think about it, we're trying to create fully functional independent learners. The easiest job in the school system should be the year 12 teacher, because those kids should already be borderline functional, capable, independent learners. But we do the opposite. We move them through school with more constraints and more of us taking care of things. And then we spit them out at the end of the process. They spend 3 months on the beach drinking, and then they arrive at uni and somehow they're functional, independent learners. Like, how does that happen? It has to happen in the high school. And processes like STEM can go a great way to do this. Of course, this is what we're all here about, STEM. I was so excited when I saw how Australia all of a sudden was alight with STEM. It's a gateway to me. It doesn't matter. It's awesome. STEM is fantastic. Here's some stats from the US, though, to consider. So the SATs in the US are a score of 1,600. And they found that students who study arts score 98 points higher on their SATs, 61 points higher on their verbal, and 42 points higher on their math when they study music appreciation, which looks a lot like literacy and numeracy. And let me just get this out of the way right now. Literacy and numeracy are not subjects. They're outcomes of exceptional teaching. And just because they're being tested and you're being pressured, we can't resort to teaching them as if they're subjects. They're outcomes, and they exist in everything. Students that study arts 4 times more likely to be awarded for attendance, 3 times more likely to be awarded for academic achievement. Interesting. That's why I've said for years that the arts are no longer ornamental, that they're fundamental, that they're as important as anything that we do in school. So do we just take, this and we just squeeze that into it, and then does that solve the problem? Now we'll have the STEM people here and the STEAM people there, and there'll be a fight. I know, I can tell it. That's not the point. The point is, so in Japan I study Aikido, which is a martial art, and I study Sado, which is tea ceremony, and Shodo, which is calligraphy. And the last character there is all the same character. It's Do. So tea ceremony is the way of tea, for example, because everything you study there is a way. It's a path, and that last character means path. And so the path is the important part to understand. And my teacher, we talked about this. He said there's 3 stages in learning that are very interesting. When you're learning any form, whether it's a martial art or whether it's a physical practice, it starts with a kata, which is a form. And the first stage is kata ni hairu, which means to enter the form, to follow the form, to do what's shown to you. And the second is kata ni jukutatsu suru, which means to master the form. Now, I've always thought that was the end, to master the form. My teacher said to me, we have to hurry and get you to mastery. And I said, why? He said, so we can begin. Because the point is, past kata ni jukutatsu suru is kata kare nukeru, which means to go beyond the form. So it doesn't matter to me whether we're talking about, project-based learning, or whether we're talking about inquiry, or STEM, or STEAM, or design thinking, or the maker movement. Don't forget the maker movement. There's a reason that I have these in bottles. They're all brands. They're all brands of future-focused learning that largely contain the same ingredients. Now, they all have their own marketing and their own conferences and their own cult-like following sometimes, but if we tear them apart, they're largely the same. So don't be limited. Go beyond. Take the excellent work you're doing and make it exceptional. And there's kind of 10 shifts of practice that I look at that are combined in all of these future-focused pedagogies. And I want to break them down for you now. The first is the use of essential questions and hurting questions. Now, anytime we talk, all of those pedagogies have an essential question. If learning is the answer, what is the question? It has to start with a question, everything. And we always see these kind of descriptors for an essential question, that it's timeless, that there's no correct answer, that it engages lateral thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And over the years when I'm helping people to develop essential questions, I sat down, I looked at it, and we always talk about it in these fuzzy terms, but there's got to be a methodology for doing it. And I looked at it and I said, you know what, there is. Let me throw it out there for you. Does anybody want to know how to the 2-step process to create an essential question? No, I can skip. We can go on. No, you want to know? Okay, number 1, move it up Bloom's. Number 2, remove specificity. Let me demonstrate. So, was Tony Abbott a good prime minister? Can we just not talk about this, please? And just, let's move on. So how do I move this up to Bloom's? Top of Bloom's is going to be at evaluate. It's going to be comparing and contrasting, forming a judgment. Okay, so was Tony Abbott or Gough Whitlam the better prime minister? Not bad for a Canadian, huh? So now if we remove the specificity, we're left with what makes a great prime minister. Now we can continue to remove specificity. I can take out prime minister and I can ask what makes a great leader. I can still get rid of specificity and I can start with this question: what is greatness? And everybody has an entry point into that, and everybody can be involved in that conversation, and then I can work backwards through those questions to get to the content if I really wanted to. We struggle to make essential questions, and we struggle to make them big enough. That's a process that will help you to do it. Remove specificity, move it up Bloom's. If you do that, you'll get it right every time. The second, even though it's the most important, is a connection through context and relevance. We know that if there is no relevance to the learner, learning does not happen. So where's the relevance? This stuff. Ask yourself this question. If this is what's on the mind of your learners, can you connect your subject matter to this? If so, let's just go do that. You know, this book I've just sent off to publishing, and part of the research, I came across some wonderful work that's just been done last year by a lady who, using fMRI scans, so functional magnetic resonance imaging. And it's very, very interesting what she had to say in her conversation. You know, what she said is that when students are emotionally engaged, they see activations all over the cortex, in the areas that are connected to memory, meaning making, and all the way down the brainstem even. That emotion is where learning begins and ends, and it's very, very interesting what she said about this, and I tend to agree with her. Based on her belief and on her research, what she says is this: that it is literally neurobiologically impossible to think deeply about something you don't care about, and she's evidenced this. If there is no emotional connection, the learning doesn't happen, period. We have to make the emotional connection to the learning. The third is that learning is personalized, and there's so many opportunities for this. We can personalize the task or the process. The research can be personalized. The assessment, the evidence of learning, all of these are opportunities for personalization, and really good opportunities for personalization. The conversation around the essential question will allow you to identify what matters to your learner and how to change the task. You know, we had a group of year fours in Melbourne that we challenged them. We said that, you know, that NASA had decided that Earth was ultimately not going to be inhabitable, and we needed to determine which was the best planet to move to, and how are we going to go about that. And that was very exciting until one of the boys said, I don't think we should move. I think we should fix Earth. So the teacher phoned me in a panic. What do I do? It's all gone. No, it's not. Now we just shift, we just pivot, and we say, great, I agree with you. So what you need to do is prove NASA wrong and explain to them why none of those other planets are options and why we need to do this one. And then guess what else we have? The next 30 unit plans tied to that. All because there's relevance to the learner and personalization. See, we have to see learning not as an outcome of teaching, but that teaching is a mindful response to learning. How do we personalize it for the learner? How do we make strong personal and emotional connections for them? The fourth shift is a challenge of higher order tasks. In every one of those pedagogies, there's a focus on evaluation and creation. It's so important. And you know, when we look at Bloom's, and we're all familiar with Bloom's, there's a couple of things I think have to happen before this. And the first is awareness. If you're not aware of something, you certainly can't remember it. And the second is connection. Well, I've already talked about that. If there's no connection, if there's no relevance, that it doesn't happen. So connection is actually where all the money is. And this line separates teaching from learning. Our job is to bring into their awareness access to new skills and new knowledge, and then to find the courage to stand aside. And so connection becomes incredibly important in this, because with a low level of connection, we'll get remembering and understanding. But with a high level of connection, we can drive this all the way up to creating. And that is exactly the point, to create those rich connections, to allow them to work at a very high level of Bloom's. The fifth is the research component. Every one of these pedagogies, every one of these processes involve some pretty significant research. And for me, that's the process of information fluency, one of the essential fluencies. And it's as important as anything we teach today. You know, we can make learners literate by the standards of the 20th century, but in doing so, they will not be literate by the standards of the 21st century. And they need process to be able to succeed, and this is one of those processes. Process-oriented is, in fact, the sixth shift of practice. That we move to analytical, critical, and creative thinking. So the reason that we use solution fluency is to allow that to happen. I'll show you a STEM challenge that I saw up in Gladstone. I walked into a year one classroom, and this is what was up on the IWB, was build a tower that holds a tennis ball using only straws and tape. Now, to describe the classroom would be just pandemonium, I guess. You know, children were actually taped to each other. It was loud, it was messy, they were screaming and yelling, and it was just awesome. It was everything learning should be. And so I said to the teacher, I said, wow, this is really something. She goes, I know they're engaged, right? I said, yeah, they're engaged. I said, what are they learning? She went, because in this task, you're not really learning anything. You're having a good muck about, but what are you really learning? Now, just add these three words. See, because when we do this, we go right to here. When we put a task like that up, it's like, grab some straws, grab some tape, let's do it. If it starts to fall over, put some more straws and tape on. No engineering principles involved there. And no analytical or critical or creative thinking. But add these three words to this. Use solution fluency. Just doing that transforms the task. Because the first is, what do I need to know? Or what am I supposed to do? Followed by, what do I need to know? What do I need to be able to do? That's the research phase, discover. The dream, what do I want it to look like? Design, what steps will I take to accomplish this? And then moving to the debrief, actually, which is to ask yourself, how will you know it was successful before you ever move to deliver? Now, there is a ton of analytical and critical thinking there. Guess what? It also happens to be the scientific method. It also happens to be the writing process. It also happens to be how we do media production. One process to rule them all, one process to bind them. And here's the interesting thing that Torpel Klingberg in his book, The Overflowing Brain, here's what he demonstrated. If you teach a structured problem-solving process to the fluency level to a learner, they will instantly have a 10 percentage point increase in IQ that they will sustain throughout their life by having a structured problem-solving process. Solution fluency as a structured process is the piece that's missing from STEM. It's the piece that's missing from PBL. What happens is we create these rich tasks and then we guide learners through them, as opposed to saying, here's the problem, here's the process, and now allowing them to struggle and to fail. That's the difference. It should be less work for the teacher, not more. Shift 7 is that learning intentions are clear. Just put them right up in front of them. It's amazing what happens when we're really clear about this, whether it's learning intentions for the class or whether it's actually the curriculum. Take the curriculum, the standards, and put them right up in front of them. This is what we're doing. Let's unpack that together. Let's build success criteria around that. And you know what's awesome when you're in a class of underperformers, kids that are maybe put into a place because everyone believes they're stupid, and they even believe it now? You put the learning intentions in front of them, even if it's something simple. Learning intentions for this class is to learn 3 words and to be able to use them in a sentence. And at the end of that class, go back to the learning intentions. Do you know 3 words you didn't know at the beginning of this class, and can you use them in a sentence? Yes. And what have they learned? They've learned that they're awesome, they've learned that they're powerful learners, they've learned that they're successful, and they've taken responsibility for their own learning. Now imagine they do that 7 periods a day and 5 days a week. How long before we transform their internal beliefs? Very, very quickly. The 8th is that there's a learner creation focus, both on creating the knowledge and creating the evidence of learning. And this is hugely, hugely, hugely important. Everyone talks about the importance of creativity. We need to actually let them do it. And it's very interesting to see the shift. You know, we know, and there's many, many works that talk about this. Brain Rules, John Medina is one of them that talks a lot about this, that we remember a certain amount of what comes through us through words, more of what comes through us through visuals, and a bigger percentage of what happens through audio-visual, where there's visuals that are combined with the audio. And I'm not talking about death by PowerPoint, I'm talking about where there's stunning visuals that go along with what a person's saying. That's why my presentations are very visual, to make up for my lack of meaningful content. But these are all passive activities. They're about receiving the information. And there's always a place for this. It's what I'm doing now. but that place is very limited in its power. Now, it's interesting. I have a wonderful graph of brains of university students for a week, 24 hours a day for a week. It's very, very interesting when you look at what's going on in a university student's brain. Now, when we're asleep, there's some things that happen that require our brains to be incredibly active because we're healing our bodies. But then we wake up and come to class. Beep! Hashtag just saying no offense for the rest of this, okay? Being in a class watching television, largely the same amount of brain activity, because it's pretty much the same process. It's passively consuming somebody else's thinking. When they're off, see social down there? When your kids are off task and they're talking, please don't punish them because they're doing more for their brain than they are by listening to you. Give them a broom and send them outside. Look at chores, right? Give them a broom, send them up to sweep up. It's doing more than it is by sitting in your... Okay, that's enough. It's getting uncomfortable now. But look at lab. Look at study. The brain is on fire because we've made the shift from passive learning to active learning, from participating to participating, from receiving. When we are involved in presentations and discussions, and when we're involved in real-world activities or simulations of them in multisensory environments. And so Bloom's taxonomy fits beautifully in here. The best that I can hope for when I'm talking to you is remembering and understanding. That's it. If you're talking, learning isn't happening. Learning happens when they're working at very, very high levels. This is why we need to focus up here. So if I was working with you for the day, it would start like this, but very soon I would be doing nothing and you'd be doing all the work, because that's the shift that has to happen. Shift 9 is mindful assessment, and assessment is mindful, and there's so many micro shifts in this book that it's tough for me to talk about it, but it's been a well-received book in Australia. But it's about being fair and clear and transparent and deliberate and purposeful. I would say 80% of the assessment I see in school has no purpose whatsoever except for reporting, and it's even then not necessary. We over-assess stuff. And we don't do assessment as learning enough. But for me, it's also about assessing not just the product, but the process. That's why the fluencies map directly over top of the general capabilities, and that's why my work has caught on so well in Australia, is because it is how we implement and how we assess the general capabilities. And both South Australia and Victoria are taking a very hard look at this right now. See, the thing is, without feedback, assessment is not a learning activity, it's a compliance task. So there's many, many micro shifts under mindful assessment, too many to talk about today, but the 10th shift that I would want to talk to you about is that we, as much as possible, do self and peer assessment, the development, the application, and the reporting of the assessment. Everybody loves John Hattie's work in Australia. His number one effect size has to do with this, has to do with self-reporting. So why aren't we doing that? Now, people get uncomfortable when I say this, that students should develop and apply and do the reporting on the assessment. Whoa, hang on a second. What do? The moderation of the assessment. That would be the role of the educator. And it could be done so simply. Let's go back to that year 1, year 2 task that we had. And I've modified it slightly now. And if we were to define the problem, we could do that by underlining and annotating what is it that we're supposed to do. And when it comes down to define, we could bullet point that out. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to use solution fluency, build a tower as tall as possible, must hold a tennis ball, only straws and tape, and use as few supplies as possible. Now, that's an accurate definition of the problem. It's also what we would call in solution fluency a level 1 on the rubric for looking at solving the problem, because we haven't unpacked it, we haven't sequenced it, we haven't determined what other tasks need to be done. We've just regurgitated what the problem was in the same order. But we could, at this point, before they begin this task now, have them set up the debrief to determine how they will be successful. And they could do that by creating evidence statements. Evidence statements would look like this. My team used solution fluency well. My team finished building a tower. Our tower is as tall as possible. They could go through this process. And guess what? This is a literacy task buried inside of what it is that they're doing. And in doing so, they understand the task pretty well. And now they can have a formative assessment around it. Maybe they identify that this is the area that they think that they're here on. And we can now have a formative conversation. I saw a tennis ball in your tower. Why would you say you only did that well? Well, the tennis ball rolled off. We realized we have to modify our design. Awesome. What's your next thing to do? We're going to modify the design. And now we're talking about iteration, which is the design thinking process. It's using solution fluency to transform the task. These are the 10 shifts of practice. Now, schools that I've worked with, and I've been fortunate, I've been very successful, that there's a lot of crazy teachers willing to follow me to go from direct teaching to a large project, like a STEM project that is multi-year level, that's multidiscipline, that is a week or two long. That is a massive first step for people. The question is, because a lot of people do STEM 1 day a week or 1 week of the month or even 1 week of the term, what are you going to do the rest of your time? And if we unpack what's involved in that STEM task, we see the 10 shifts of practice. So which one can you do next? They become micro shifts. Well, it's really simple. Even if we're doing a direct teaching lesson, we can put the learning intentions in front of the learners. We can start with that. If we're direct teaching math, it doesn't have, we can present the learning intentions to them, and we can present 4 concepts and have them learn them together in 4 learning commons, which is involving research, and it's involving teaching to others, and it's involving so many things. There's so much we can do. It's about making micro shifts in your practice to get you to that massive STEM task. And even within your STEM task, these are the pieces that are contained within. So I want you to think beyond STEM. So just think about, what does future-focused learning look like? And how can you transform your practice without reinventing everything? And these are the shifts that will help you there. I'd like to finish by talking to you about dental floss. It's important. We should all use it. That's it. No, there's more. So Colgate recently released a series of full-color ads of dudes that were in serious need of dental floss, like this. This dude needs some dental floss badly. But the thing is, what's happening is we are so focused on the fact that he needs dental floss that we don't notice that she has 6 fingers on her hand. And we're so focused on the fact that this dude needs dental floss that we don't say, where the heck is that arm coming from? Because it's not hers. Uncomfortable. And we're so focused on the fact that this guy needs dental floss that we don't notice he's missing an ear. See, our attention is elsewhere. Our attention is distracted by curriculum, by standards, by NAPLAN, by pressures, by all of these things. But I've said to you before, it's when we're unaware, unwilling, or unable to shift that we're in trouble. So what I've tried to do in our short time together is to create some awareness of what's possible, of how you can transform what's happening on a daily basis, and how you can enrich your STEM topics to be very, very meaningful to your learners. The question is now really, are you willing and are you able? Because if you're willing, we can help you get there. Conferences like this can help you get there. Me and my team can help you get there. There's a ton of resources on our website that you're welcome to access. We produce an incredible amount of content. And you'll find on the website as well access to the Solution Fluency Planner, which has, I think, 20,000 teachers in Australia using it now, and there's over 2,000 very complete units for STEM on there that my team and I have written. And how I see this work, and how I see our children. Here's what I want our kids to know. You are a global digital citizen, and your identity transcends geographical and political borders. Humankind is one and is full of life. Embrace this great community. Help where there is true need and cooperate to make change permanent. Be compassionate. Have your own ideas and express them, and be open to new ways of seeing or being. Be mindful. Your actions transcend time and space, touching everyone and everything. Respect and take responsibility for yourself, others, and everything around you. Stay curious about the world. Look after your environment. Be mindful of what you need, what you take, and how you use it. Believe you can make a positive difference. Take action to overcome, fix problems, resolve issues, and overcome challenges to achieve results you believe to be honest, just, and fair for yourself and for humankind. And last and most important, be your best self by lifting up others to be their best selves. You are the most important professionals on the planet. You literally hold the future in your hands. Our children are 15% of our population, but they are 100% of our future. My sensei in Japan said, you don't lead others by standing above them, but being like a layer of an onion one skin beneath them and pushing them to grow and to expand and to fill new space. And as teachers, teaching is not a job, nor is it an occupation or even a career. We live in service to our children, you and I. And so I would like to thank you for always lifting them up to be greater than they can believe they can be. And thank you for your commitment to our kids and your kind and patient attention. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.